Hello, this is Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for the Center for the Future Work at Cognizant. I want to thank you for joining me today. I just completed one of the most interesting interviews I've ever done. This is with a gentleman that I think most of you will know, Dan Bricklin. Dan Bricklin grew up working next to the likes of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. His application, VisiCalc, was known as the first killer app ever developed. What's the definition of killer app? Killer app is an app that drives the sale of complete computer systems. So you might spend $100 on VisiCalc, but you buy a $2,000 to $10,000 computer system capable of running it. Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst with the Center for the Future of Work at Cognizant, and I'm just thrilled today to not only be here in Boston at the M Enterprise Conference, but also to have Dan Bricklin, who's famous in the circles of app development and other areas, with me today. So thank you, Dan.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. I'm lucky you to be here during our fall. During the fall season with all the leaves and everything. I hope you're getting out into it at least a little bit.
Oh yeah, so for those of you that have been involved in software, everybody knows Dan Bricklin. He was the developer of VisiCalc, which is one of the first killer apps on the Apple, although you corrected me and said you sold more on the IBM platform.
Yeah, but the thing is that it was a killer app. The definition of a killer app is that it justified buying the machine and stuff like that. So, which it did for the Apple II, and initially on the IBM PC, and then eventually other spreadsheets came along, with Lotus being like the 50th, but the one that was most successful on the IBM PC.
Okay, so has, let me just be honest with you, I still can't get spreadsheets to work great on the iPhone. You had it working many years ago on an Apple.
But see, I think that's important to understand about mobility and about software in general, is that there's certain type of things you want to do, and certain hardware with certain input and output is useful for doing those things. Which is why we sit at a desk for certain things and stand up for other things, and lie down for, there, some things, the tools have to be appropriate to the task in many cases. And for what the spreadsheet was designed around, the needs of a screen with a keyboard and arrow keys. Originally, I had planned it to have a mouse. Okay. But their mice just weren't available.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about 1979. The Macintosh wasn't until 1984, and even the Xerox Star, the first commercial machine with a mouse, wasn't until after VisiCalc. So. But the arrow keys were very appropriate for it, and the keyboard was very appropriate for typing in formulas and stuff like that. And the larger screen also was important for the type of stuff that you do with it.
Because at a certain point, you're trying to compact too much on the screen.
Well, it's like, you're trying to think about big stuff. Now, it's a little different now that we're into the world of, let's say, the iPad Plus. Yes. And stuff like that. In fact, we did work at Slate Corporation back in the early 90s. About spreadsheets on a pen-centric computer. And in fact, I even have patents in that area that now belong to Hewlett-Packard. Wow. About using handwriting and targeting and how to do selection with the mouse and stuff, without a mouse, using the pen to do your input and stuff. But the thing is that a phone, you don't expect that. Like, you don't use a phone for, especially a little phone, for things that require bigger screens or whatever. You don't use a desktop machine for something where you want to be mobile, etc. So the particulars of the hardware do make a difference. And when we look at the task, you want the software to be, and the hardware to be appropriate to the tasks that you want to do. And vice versa, depending on the software and hardware, there's certain tasks that are appropriate. Absolutely. To both directions.
So today you're here at M Enterprise, focused on enterprise mobility with Alpha Software.
Yes, I'm CTO, Chief Technology Officer at Alpha Software Corporation.
Got it. Now, tell me what you guys are bringing today into mobility.
So, I've been in the productivity world for a long time. which is basically business type of use, or even among individuals, it's for businessy type of things.
Yes.
You know, and that's the area that I've been in. And recently, until a few years ago, I was heavily into iPad development, and I had an application, or have an application still out there on the iPad called Note Taker HD for taking handwritten notes and for marking up PDFs. And what I realized is an awful lot of people in business were using it to mark up forms, to use that as a way to mark up forms rather than taking the paper, because then you could do certain things with it.
Yeah.
And I realized that that's an important area for business. It's one thing of the many things you can do with mobile, but it's an important thing that you can do with mobile.
I mean, there's a lot of forms floating around.
That's right. And the thing is that a form, it's not that a form is important, it's that a form is a particular manifestation of a step in a process that goes on. Usually data collection of some sort. It often has some pre-printed stuff on it, so it sort of has a data, data presentation and a data collection, and then you use it to move on in other parts of the data process. So I realized that I needed, if that's an area that I was interested in, I realized it's an area ripe for user interface innovation, because we can do things. We don't have a mouse. We don't have a mouse and a keyboard anymore.
Right.
We're talking about a mobile device with a camera.
Yes.
With touch, multi-touch, sound.
Voice recognition.
You can have voice wherever you are. Voice recognition if you want, but sometimes you just want voice.
Yeah.
And video. That these type of things are important. People who are doing inspections, people who are in the field, people who are in clinics, the doctors and nurses and all that. That's, if you've ever been in a hospital situation, how many pieces of paper do you have to go through?
Well, and Dan, what I'm so frustrated with is my existing doctor I've been with for 20 years will bring out regularly new paper to say, let's update this.
Update this. And also, you would expect, you're filling paper, you expect maybe that paper, the thing you're filling out would immediately show up on a big screen next to the operating table. So
or
that they
give me the forms pre-filled out. Just print them off with all my address.
Why print them out? But why isn't it on a tablet? I mean, and stuff like that. So that's the area that I realized that, and that I joined Alpha because Alpha has a system that is for people who are more interested in solving the problem than in coding. Coding is not the thing they care about. They're willing to code, they know how to code perhaps when they need to, but they want to get problems solved. They also want to do the back-end part, the database stuff. They want to connect to SQL and Oracle and SQL Server and all that, and web services and all. So they want that. And AlphaHurry has been doing all those things. But I wanted to concentrate on the client side. I had done a lot of work in the HTML world, in the JavaScript world. I actually implemented a spreadsheet, an open source spreadsheet called Social Calca several years back. That's on the one laptop and child and stuff. So I have a lot of experience in the JavaScript world. And Alpha had decided to deploy that their client side was going to be all HTML5. And with the ability to use PhoneGap to make it a wrapped app, if you want, I realized that you've got to be able to run on multi-platforms. As an iOS developer who knows, I lived in Xcode, still live in it once in a while. I understand what it means to do that, but I understand the difficulty of being able and then say, oh, let's do Android too, and let's do, how about Windows? Because now Windows has some really nice things and stuff. Because if you think that a company may have, in one part of it, it might have 900 forms. That's 900 separate apps that probably have to be, if you view, I mean, they may be launched by one launcher or something, but you're talking about, you're crafting those, and you don't want it to be the same as the paper, because paper derived from punch cards. If you think about it, in the old days, 1800s and all, they didn't use punch cards, right? It wasn't until the late 1800s they were invented. But people took logbooks and they could draw pictures and they could do stuff. Then we sort of went to punch cards and simple database that used punch card and fields like that. And now all our forms are based upon, a fixed record or something like that. Well, now we have these devices, the tablets and the phones that can also take pictures.
Oh yeah.
Which is, you know, back to the days, you know, Audubon could draw things.
Yeah.
Well, though actually in those days they would take samples. They took specimens back and they
shoot them, set them up.
Well, they needed them, but they took notes.
Yes.
Handwritten notes about how they, what their behavior was like, so they could pose them in the right way.
Yes.
But we of course can take photographs. We can take video. We can do handwriting on these things. I mean, that's the app that I had on was Note-Taker HD, was handwriting, not for handwriting recognition, but for handwriting for taking handwritten notes and drawing diagrams and marking up pictures and stuff like that. So we can do those things, and that's the area that I think it's not the sexy area of business to consumer, where a business frequently has an app or two they have to interact with their customers. Mm-hmm. That's more in a marketing, the user interface requirements are different. Yeah. You care about, you want them to use it as opposed to this is a tool to their business.
Right, so it's not utility, it's brand, it's
brand, it's all that. They have to, you know, you want to entice them to use it.
Yes.
As opposed to a thing that this makes their job easier, that's a requirement of their job, that's that it puts in the flow of what they're doing, and you have to build it, and you're measuring things in terms of, is a person in the field not have to come back to the office, get something, go back again, because they could do it all at once in the field, or they were prepared in advance. They had just-in-time training. They were able to connect to what they, you can measure the amount of time it takes to fill it out. If you think about today's medical record systems, which seem to be designed specifically to make a doctor not look at the patient, because there's you know, and have bad, you know, and be really mess up the process and make it take longer. You realize that you want to design things that make it better, are easier to use than paper, that are better, and if it's easier, it'll be faster. If done right, it'll be fast. You can design it to be faster. You think about it, innovate in the area, faster, less error prone. This is important, and that's great savings to business. Oh,
absolutely. And so then you can pre-populate, because you can be connected to back-end databases.
Right. You can have preloaded incredible amounts of stuff.
Validations.
Of course, I mean, you put a number in, and, you know, or a value in, or something. One example we have is that we have an application somebody's using where the people are measuring, watching something happen, and measuring how much time it is. So the field actually has a start and stop button for a time, so you don't have to sit there and then type in how much time it took. You know, it's but if it's over a certain amount of time, then you would then have certain follow-up questions. Under a certain amount, you'd have different follow-up. You can do all this stuff. You can say this is out of range.
Because you can have all this logic and workflow built into the forms.
Right. You can say. If somebody, the form says, what about such and such? It's, I don't know, how do I mean that? Well, you push the help button, the more help button. It says, here's how you do it. You just loosen the case. How do I loosen the case? Push a button, up comes a video that shows you how to loosen the case.
I imagine it's not too far of a jump to hook Bluetooth measuring and sensors of all kinds to populate the fields.
A common thing is a real common thing is to use barcode, you know, to use the camera as a barcode reader, which will then, you know, call up the particular device that you're servicing. For example, you're out servicing, you know, boilers and stuff, and you want to take, you know, and there's a pump, and that has a little barcode on it, and that gives you and you have that because there's a lot of storage on these devices. So this is a particular area, the area of business to consumer. The areas, a lot of social stuff, those are other uses of mobile. Just like we use computers for so many things. And it's you know, the popular meme now of you know, software is eating the world. It's in everything, right? This is one use of it, but it's a use that I think is important.